Hi, lastly, what we're going to talk about in this module has to do with another component of deductive reasoning, and that's what goes unsaid in what we're arguing. Now, to see what I mean by this, consider this argument. Let's say I'm making the argument having to do with a new seminar related to cheating, and I have evidence that cheating has increased 20% at ECC. Okay, let's say I have evidence, statistics to prove that. And I also have evidence that a new seminar that students will go through will decrease cheating. I have evidence that it will decrease cheating. Solve the problem. So then I come to the conclusion and I take this to the Board of Trustees and say we should invest in the new seminar. Okay? Now if these two things are true, does this thing have to be true? Well, only if a few assumptions are also being made. Okay? Let me show you a different example with very similar wording to see if you start to notice what I mean. Let's say I make a similar claim that attendance has increased 20% at ECC, attendance at classes. Now a new seminar will decrease attendance, so we should invest in the new seminar. Would anybody agree with this? Keeping in mind that the only difference is that I changed cheating to attendance. Well, hopefully you look at that and say, but we don't want to get rid of attendance. That's a good thing, right? Well, that's the underlying assumption here, isn't it? Up here, we are making the assumption that cheating is bad and should be avoided. Okay, and we're also making the assumption that the new seminar is worth the decrease in cheating. Okay? Because down here, attendance has increased 20%, but this will decrease attendance. Well, we don't have the same assumption that attendance is bad, right? So all of a sudden, this argument makes no sense, okay? So that's what I mean by something that goes unsaid, okay? This, if you look to your textbook, the Quick Access Compact on page 89, is what we refer to as the Toulmin model for argument. And if you look there, it talks about a claim, which is the same thing as your thesis statement, essentially. Then you have support, your reasons, and evidence. They also talk about warrants. Okay, I like the word assumption better than warrant, personally, but the same idea is that this is what is implied. Okay, the author's underlying assumptions for the argument to be true. Okay, now some of these are obvious, right? Cheating is bad and should be avoided. Nobody really disagrees with that, so seeing a new seminar will decrease cheating, we should invest in it, not a problem. But what about other assumptions, right? For instance, a new seminar will decrease cheating. Okay, let's say that's true, but by how much? What if it decreases cheating by 20%, the same amount that it's increased? Would that be worth it? Probably. What if it only decreases at 1%? That's 19% unaccounted for. Would you be okay with it then? Maybe, maybe not, right? So we're assuming that whatever the seminar is doing is worth the decrease in cheating. And if we're not willing to make that assumption, then we add extra evidence, okay? Now, let's say that it decreases at 20%, but it costs, the seminar, bringing in the people to teach it, is going to cost an additional $1,000 per student. Once again, all of a sudden, it may not be worth it based on the cost and actually what it's producing. So you got to account for these things, okay? So we would bring in evidence related to cost and effectiveness, because those are things that are not good enough to assume. Okay, so we would need to move that up into our actual evidence. But cheating is bad and should be avoided. That's something that you can rely on as an assumption. Because at the end of the day, you have to make some assumptions, right? You can't state every single thing that must be true because you will never stop talking, right? There's always some underlying assumption that needs to be made, right? But the point is, some things shouldn't be left to chance, okay? So that's the balance you need to find, and there's other examples on page 89 and 90 of things that could be assumed, things that need to be proven, okay? That's a big audience consideration at the end of the day, okay? What do you think your reader's likely to agree with versus what does the reader need to have some evidence for? Okay, if you can take that into account, you're gonna make sure your deductive reasoning is not leaving a big hole in your argument before you're even making your point.